The arrival. The vast expanse of space stretched out before the galactic ranger vessel Earthborn Thunder as it approached Nexus Station, a bustling hub of interstellar commerce and cultural exchange. Inside the ship's bridge, Ranger Sarah Connor stood with her arms crossed, her piercing green eyes fixed on the looming space station. Nexus Control, this is Earthborn Thunder requesting docking clearance. Sarah spoke into the comm system, her voice calm but authoritative. A crackle of static preceded the response. Earthborn Thunder, clearance granted. Proceed to Bay 17. As the ship maneuvered towards its designated berth, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of anticipation and unease. Her latest assignment had brought her to this far-flung corner of the galaxy, pursuing a notorious criminal who had managed to evade capture for years. The criminal in question was Zaxlor, a Centaurian smuggler known for his cunning and brutality. Intelligence suggested he was using Nexus Station as a base of operations for a major illegal weapons deal. Sarah's mission was clear: apprehend Zaxlor and dismantle his operation. As the docking clamps engaged and the airlock sealed, Sarah checked her gear one last time. Her standard-issue plasma pistol sat snugly in its holster, while a more impressive weapon, a Terran Gauss rifle, was secured to her back. It was a testament to humanity's approach to galactic peacekeeping. Always be prepared for the worst. Stepping out onto the station, Sarah was immediately engulfed by a cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells. Nexus Station was a melting pot of species from across the galaxy, each adding their own unique flavor to the mix. Holographic advertisements flickered in dozens of languages, while the air was thick with the aroma of exotic cuisines and the acrid smell of starship fuel. Sarah made her way through the crowded corridors, her trained eyes scanning for any sign of her quarry. She knew Zaxlor wouldn't be easy to spot. Centaurians were masters of disguise, capable of altering their appearance at will. As she navigated through the throng of aliens, Sarah couldn't help but notice the curious and sometimes wary glances directed her way. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only a century ago. Yet in that short time, they had made quite an impression. Humanity's rapid technological advancement and their knack for innovative problem-solving had quickly earned them a reputation as a force to be reckoned with. It was why Sarah, despite being outnumbered by countless alien species, walked with confidence through the station. She knew that the mere presence of a human ranger was often enough to make even the most hardened criminals think twice. Sarah's contemplation was interrupted by a commotion ahead. A crowd had gathered around what appeared to be some sort of altercation. As she pushed her way forward, she caught sight of a familiar face, or rather, lack thereof. A Centaurian, its features a swirling mass of colors and textures, was engaged in a heated argument with a group of Vorgans, a reptilian species known for their quick tempers and quicker trigger fingers. "I told you, the deal's off," the Centaurian hissed, its voice a discordant melody of tones. "Find another supplier." One of the Vorgans, a hulking brute with scales the color of rusted iron, took a menacing step forward. "You can't back out now, Zaxlor. We had an agreement." Sarah's heart raced. This was it, her target, out in the open. She began to move, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. But before she could act, chaos erupted. Zaxlor, sensing the impending violence, lashed out with lightning speed. His arm elongated, stretching impossibly far as it struck the Vorgan leader square in the chest. The alien went flying, crashing into a nearby food stall, in a shower of exotic fruits and startled yelps. The other Vorgans roared in anger, drawing their weapons, an assortment of energy pistols and vibroblades. Civilians scrambled to get out of the way as the first shots were fired, leaving scorch marks on the station's metallic walls. Sarah sprang into action, her training taking over. "Galactic Rangers," she shouted, her voice cutting through the pandemonium. "Stand down immediately." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. All eyes turned to Sarah, taking in her imposing figure and the unmistakable insignia of the Galactic Rangers on her uniform. The Vorgons hesitated, their reptilian faces contorted in a mixture of rage and uncertainty. Zaxlor, however, wasted no time. With a fluid motion that defied physics, the Centaurian's body shifted and morphed, taking on the appearance of a nondescript station worker. Before anyone could react, he bolted, disappearing into the crowd. "Damn it," Sarah muttered under her breath. She activated her comm link, speaking rapidly. "This is Ranger Connor. I've made contact with the target. Zaxlor is on the move. Lock down all exit points." As alarms began to blare throughout the station, Sarah turned her attention to the Vorgons, who were now looking decidedly less confident. "Weapons down now," she ordered, her hand resting on her plasma pistol. The lead Vorgon, nursing a bruised ego and what was likely several broken ribs, growled in defiance. "This doesn't concern you, human. This is between us and that treacherous shapeshifter." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I'm making it my concern. You're interfering with a galactic ranger operation and endangering civilian lives. Stand down, or I'll be forced to take action." There was a tense moment as the Vorgons weighed their options. Sarah knew they were considering whether to call her bluff. But that was the thing about humans. They rarely bluffed. With a resigned snarl, the Vorgons lowered their weapons. "This isn't over," the leader hissed as Sarah began to secure them. "Oh, I'm counting on it," Sarah replied, a grim smile playing on her lips. "I have a feeling you boys know more about Zaxlor's operation than you're letting on, and we're going to have a nice, long chat about it." As station security arrived to take the Vorgons into custody, Sarah's mind was already racing ahead. Zaxlor had slipped through her fingers this time, but the chase was just beginning. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was the thrill of the hunt. With a determined set to her jaw, Sarah set off into the depths of Nexus Station, ready to unravel the web of secrets and lies that surrounded her elusive quarry. The game was afoot, and humanity's reputation as the galaxy's most tenacious problem solvers was about to be put to the test. The chase begins. Sarah Connor's boots echoed against the metal flooring as she sprinted through the winding corridors of Nexus Station. Her eyes darted from side to side, scanning the faces of countless aliens for any sign of her shape-shifting quarry. The station's security alarms blared overhead, adding to the chaos of the pursuit. "Computer, analyze station security feeds. Look for any anomalies or sudden changes in individual appearances," Sarah commanded, her breath steady despite the exertion. The neural link embedded in her temple pulsed as it processed the request. A holographic display flickered to life on her wrist computer. Analysis complete. Potential match detected in Sector 7, Level 3. Caution. 73% probability of positive identification. Sarah smirked. Even with their advanced technology, catching a Centaurian was never a sure thing. But humans had long ago learned to work with probabilities, to find patterns where others saw only chaos. As she rounded a corner into Sector 7, Sarah nearly collided with a tall, willowy alien with bioluminescent skin. The Quarian scientist stumbled back, his antennae twitching in alarm. "My apologies, Dr. Zalthrak," Sarah said, recognizing the renowned xenobiologist. "I'm in pursuit of a dangerous criminal. Have you seen anyone suspicious pass by?" The Quarian's large, compound eyes blinked rapidly. "Ranger Connor, what a surprise." I'm not sure. There have been so many people rushing about since the alarm started. But," he hesitated, antennae quivering. Sarah's instincts prickled. "But what, Doctor?" "Well, it's probably nothing, but I did see someone enter the hydroponics lab just a moment ago. They seemed off somehow, as if their form wasn't quite settled." That was all Sarah needed to hear. "Thank you, Doctor. Please, clear the area and alert security if you see anything else unusual." With a nod of acknowledgement, Sarah approached the hydroponics lab. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear the soft hum of machinery from within. Drawing her plasma pistol, she took a deep breath and entered. The lab was a jungle of alien flora, with plants of every conceivable shape and color stretching from floor to ceiling. Mist swirled around Sarah's feet as she moved cautiously between the rows of vegetation. The air was thick with the scent of exotic pollens and nutrient solutions. "Come out, Zaxlor," Sarah called, her voice steady. "There's nowhere left to run. Let's end this peacefully." A rustling sound to her left caught her attention. Sarah whirled, weapon raised, only to find a cluster of vines retracting rapidly. Her eyes narrowed. Those weren't part of the hydroponic system. "Clever," she muttered, "but not clever enough." Without warning, a tendril of plant matter whipped out from behind her, wrapping around her wrist and yanking her off balance. Sarah grunted, using the momentum to roll and come up in a defensive stance. The plants around her seemed to come alive, writhing and reaching for her with malevolent intent. "You humans," Zaxlor's voice echoed through the lab, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Always so confident, so sure of your superiority. But you're in my world now, Ranger." Sarah dodged another grasping vine, her mind racing. Zaxlor wasn't just hiding. He had somehow merged with the plant life itself. It was an impressive display of Centaurian adaptability. But Sarah wasn't about to let it stop her. "That's where you're wrong, Zaxlor," she replied, a plan already forming in her mind. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to adapt, to think on our feet." With lightning speed, Sarah holstered her pistol and reached for a small canister on her belt. In one fluid motion, she activated it and tossed it into the center of the lab. There was a soft hiss, and then a fine mist began to spread rapidly through the air. What is this?" Zaxlor's voice wavered, a note of panic creeping in. The writhing plants began to slow, their movements becoming sluggish. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Rapid-release herbicide, specially designed to target non-terrestrial plant species. Harmless to most sentient life forms, but I'm betting it's playing havoc with your current biology." A howl of frustration echoed through the lab as the plants began to wilt and shrivel. From amidst the dying vegetation, a humanoid form began to coalesce, its features shifting rapidly as it struggled to maintain cohesion. "It's over, Zaxlor," Sarah said, training her weapon on the Centaurian. "Your weapons deal, your escape plans, all of it ends here." But Zaxlor, even in his weakened state, wasn't ready to give up. With a snarl of defiance, he lunged at Sarah, his body elongating and twisting in ways that defied physics. Sarah fired, the plasma bolt searing through the air, but Zaxlor's fluid form allowed him to dodge at the last second. The two combatants crashed together in a tangle of limbs, human determination against alien adaptability. They rolled across the lab floor, scattering plant debris and toppled equipment. Sarah grunted as one of Zaxlor's elongated arms slammed her against a wall, but she used the momentum to drive her knee into what she hoped was a vulnerable spot. Zaxlor hissed in pain, his form rippling as he struggled to maintain coherence. Sarah pressed her advantage, delivering a series of swift, calculated strikes that kept the Centaurian off balance. But just as she thought she had the upper hand, Zaxlor's body seemed to liquefy, slipping through her grasp like mercury. "You can't win, human," Zaxlor taunted, his voice gurgling as his form continued to shift. "I'll always be one step ahead, always able to change while you remain." Static. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her mind working furiously. Zaxlor was right. In a prolonged physical confrontation, his adaptability gave him a significant advantage. But there was more than one way to win a fight. "You're right, Zaxlor," Sarah said, slowly backing away. "I can't change my physical form like you can, but that's not the only kind of adaptation that matters." With a swift motion, Sarah activated her wrist computer again. "Computer, initiate Protocol Omega. Authorization. Connor Alpha 7 to 93. The lab's environmental controls suddenly sprang to life. Vents opened in the ceiling, and a rush of supercooled air began to flood the room. The temperature plummeted rapidly, frost forming on every surface. Zaxlor's amorphous form began to slow, his movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. "What? What are you doing?" he gasped, his voice distorted by the rapid changes in his physiology. "Adapting," Sarah replied simply, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Centaurians like you thrive in warm, humid environments. But at extreme low temperatures, your ability to change form is severely impaired. You become brittle." As if to emphasize her point, Sarah delivered a precise kick to Zaxlor's now semi-solid form. There was a crackling sound, and the Centaurian howled in pain as fractures appeared across his surface. "How?" Zaxlor managed to sputter as his body began to freeze in place. "How could you possibly know?" Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "You're not the only one who does their homework, Zaxlor. Humanity may be new to the galactic stage, but we learn fast. And we never, ever underestimate our opponents." With a final, desperate lunge, Zaxlor tried to reach for Sarah, but his movements were too slow, too predictable now. Sarah sidestepped easily, watching as the Centaurian's form finally solidified completely, frozen in a twisted, reaching posture. Breathing heavily, Sarah approached the now immobile criminal. "Zaxlor, by the authority of the Galactic Rangers, you are under arrest for smuggling, assault, and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent. Although right now, I don't think that'll be a problem." As station security finally arrived on the scene, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Once again, humanity had proven its worth on the galactic stage, not through overwhelming firepower or advanced technology, but through quick thinking, adaptability, and an unyielding determination to succeed against all odds. But as she watched the frozen form of Zaxlor being carefully transported away, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The weapons deal, the reason for Zaxlor's presence on Nexus Station, all of that remained a mystery. And if there was one thing Sarah Connor and humanity as a whole couldn't resist, it was a good mystery. With a determined set to her jaw, Sarah set off to begin her investigation. The chase might be over, but the real work was just beginning. Unlikely alliances, the interrogation room on Nexus Station was a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the station's public areas. Sarah Connor sat across from the still-thawing form of Zaxlor, her green eyes fixed on the Centaurian's shifting features. Despite the climate-controlled environment, small ice crystals still clung to Zaxlor's skin, a reminder of his recent defeat. "Let's try this again," Sarah said, her voice level but tinged with frustration. "Who are you selling those weapons to? And why here on Nexus Station?" Zaxlor's mouth twisted into what might have been a smirk. "You humans, always so direct. Has it occurred to you that perhaps there are forces at play beyond your comprehension?" Sarah leaned forward, her patience wearing thin. "Oh, I comprehend plenty. I comprehend that you're facing charges that could land you in a max-security prison on an asteroid for the next century. I also comprehend that cooperation could significantly reduce that sentence." Before Zaxlor could respond, the door to the interrogation room hissed open. A tall, insectoid alien entered, its carapace gleaming under the harsh lights. Sarah recognized the species immediately. A Thraxian, one of the oldest and most respected races in the galaxy. "Ranger Connor." The Thraxian's mandibles clicked as it spoke. "I am Zix Era, head of Nexus Station Security." "A word, if you please." Sarah nodded, rising from her seat. "We'll continue this later," she said to Zaxlor, who merely blinked his multiple eyes in response. Once outside, Zix Era turned to Sarah, its compound eyes unreadable. "Ranger, while we appreciate your assistance in apprehending this criminal, I must insist that you turn him over to station authorities immediately." Sarah's brow furrowed. "With all due respect, Zix Era, this is a Galactic Ranger operation. Zaxlor is wanted for crimes across multiple systems." The Thraxian's antennae twitched in what Sarah had learned was a sign of agitation. "Be that as it may, there are diplomatic considerations at play." The Centaurian government has lodged a formal protest against his detention. Diplomatic considerations. Sarah's voice rose slightly. Zaxlor is a known arms dealer and murderer. Since when does that warrant diplomatic immunity? Sarah's mandibles clacked together in what might have been a sigh. The situation is complex. There are aspects to this case that are, shall we say, sensitive in nature. Sarah felt her frustration mounting. This was typical of the bureaucratic tangles that often hindered Galactic Ranger operations, but she hadn't come this far to be stonewalled by politics. I understand sensitive, Sarah said, forcing herself to remain calm. But I also understand that there's a bigger picture here. Zaxlor's weapons deal could destabilize this entire sector if we don't get to the bottom of it. The Thraxian was silent for a moment, its antennae waving slowly. Then, to Sarah's surprise, it leaned in closer, lowering its voice. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement, Ranger Connor. One that satisfies both our needs. Sarah raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. There is a faction within the station's governing council that shares your concerns, Sarah explained. We believe that Zaxlor's activities may be tied to a larger conspiracy, one that threatens not just this station, but the stability of the entire quadrant. Go on, Sarah urged, her interest piqued. We cannot move openly against Zaxlor without risking diplomatic incident. But if you were to, continue your investigation unofficially, with our covert support. Sarah understood immediately. You want me to be your deniable asset. To dig into this conspiracy without officially involving station authorities. Sarah's mandibles clicked in what Sarah took to be agreement. Precisely. You would have access to our resources, but officially, you would be operating independently. If you were to uncover evidence of a larger plot, then you could act on that evidence without compromising your political position. Sarah finished. It was a clever plan, she had to admit, and it played to humanity's strengths: adaptability, resourcefulness, and a knack for operating in the gray areas between official jurisdictions. Sarah considered for a moment, weighing the risks and potential rewards. Finally, she nodded. All right, I'm in. But I'll need full access to your intelligence networks and a liaison I can trust. Agreed, Sarah said, extending a multi-jointed limb. I believe you've already met Dr. Zalthrak. The Quarian xenobiologist has been assisting our investigation discreetly. He will be your point of contact. As if on cue, the willowy form of Dr. Zalthrak emerged from around a corner. His bioluminescent skin pulsed with what Sarah recognized as excitement. Ranger Connor, the Quarian said, his antennae quivering. I must say I've been looking forward to working with you. Your species' problem-solving capabilities are truly fascinating. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Quarians were known for their scientific curiosity, and it seemed Dr. Zalthrak saw their collaboration as much as a research opportunity as an investigation. Glad to have you aboard, Doctor, Sarah said. I have a feeling we're going to need all the brain power we can get on this one. As the unlikely trio, human, Thraxian, and Quarian, began to discuss their plans, Sarah felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. This was what humanity excelled at: forging alliances, adapting to new situations, and tackling seemingly insurmountable challenges head-on. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah, along with Dr. Zalthrak, pored over station security logs, shipping manifestos, and communication records. The Quarian's ability to process vast amounts of data complemented Sarah's intuitive approach to investigation perfectly. Fascinating, Dr. Zalthrak murmured, his bioluminescent patterns shifting rapidly as he analyzed a holographic display. It appears that Zaxlor's shipments coincide with unusual energy fluctuations in the station's power grid. Sarah leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data. Those fluctuations, they're not random. There's a pattern here, almost like a code, Dr. Zalthrak finished, his antennae twitching with excitement, but not one I'm familiar with. Perhaps a method of covert communication. Sarah nodded, her mind racing. Or a way to mask the true nature of the shipments. We need to break this code if we're going to unravel this conspiracy. As they worked, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the effectiveness of their collaboration. Humanity's ability to think outside the box, combined with Quarian analytical skills and Thraxian resources, was proving to be a formidable combination. Their breakthrough came in the early hours of the station's night cycle. Dr. Zelthrak's multifaceted eyes widened as he made a startling discovery. "Ranger Connor, look at this," he said, pulling up a new set of data. "I've cross-referenced the energy fluctuations with known wormhole signatures. There's a match, but it's impossible." Sarah leaned in, her fatigue forgotten. "What do you mean, impossible?" The Quarian's skin pulsed with a mix of excitement and concern. "These signatures, they're consistent with micro-wormholes, but the technology to create stable micro-wormholes is purely theoretical. No known species has achieved it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. So either someone's made a massive technological leap, or we're dealing with a threat from beyond known space, Dr. Zelthrak finished, his voice barely above a whisper. The implications were staggering. If Zaxalor was involved in smuggling advanced wormhole technology, or worse, facilitating the arrival of an unknown alien force, the entire balance of power in the galaxy could be at risk. Sarah's mind was already racing, formulating plans and contingencies. This was no longer just about catching a criminal. It was about potentially averting a galactic crisis. And once again, humanity found itself at the center of events that would shape the future of the cosmos. "All right, Doctor," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. "We've got our work cut out for us. Let's see if we can't save the galaxy before breakfast, shall we?" As they dove back into their investigation with renewed vigor, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Humanity might be newcomers to the galactic stage, but they were proving their worth time and time again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was confident that human ingenuity, combined with the strengths of their alien allies, would see them through. The chase had evolved into something far bigger than Sarah had anticipated, but she was ready. After all, taking on the impossible was what humanity did best. The tables turned. The soft hum of Nexus Station's night cycle did little to mask the tension in the air as Sarah Connor and Dr. Zelthrak hurried through the dimly lit corridors. Their recent discovery about the micro-wormholes had sent shockwaves through the small group of allies they had gathered. "We need to inform Zixera immediately," Sarah said, her voice low but urgent. "If there's even a chance of an extragalactic threat, we need to." Her words were cut short by a deafening explosion that rocked the entire station. Alarms blared to life as emergency force field generators kicked in, containing the damage but bathing the corridor in an eerie blue glow. "What in the name of Earth was that?" Sarah exclaimed, already reaching for her weapon. Dr. Zelthrak's bioluminescent skin pulsed rapidly, a sign of his distress. It came from the detention level. "Ranger Connor, you don't think?" Sarah's eyes widened in realization. "Zaxalor. Come on." They sprinted towards the source of the explosion, dodging panicked station residents and security personnel scrambling to respond. As they neared the detention level, the acrid smell of burnt circuitry and something alien filled the air. The scene that greeted them was one of utter chaos. The detention cell that had held Zaxalor was now a smoking ruin, its reinforced walls torn apart as if they were made of paper. Bodies of security guards littered the ground, their forms twisted in ways that defied natural physiology. "By the cosmic egg," Dr. Zelthrak whispered, his antennae drooping in shock. "What could have done this?" Sarah approached one of the fallen guards cautiously, her trained eyes taking in every detail. The guard's body seemed to have been reshaped, as if its very molecular structure had been altered. "This wasn't just a breakout," Sarah muttered, her mind racing. "This was a transformation. Whatever Zaxalor was involved with, it's changed him into something else." A weak groan caught their attention. One of the guards, a Krell with thick armored scales, was still clinging to life. Sarah knelt beside him, activating her medical scanner. "What happened here?" she asked urgently. "Where's the prisoner?" The Krell's eyes were wide with terror, his usually impenetrable scales showing signs of the same molecular alteration that had affected the others. It wasn't him anymore, he gasped. Said something about transcendence, a gift from beyond the void. Then he changed. With a final, shuddering breath, the Krell fell still. Sarah stood slowly, her face grim. "Doctor, we need to lock down this station now. Whatever Zaxlor has become, we can't let him escape." But even as the words left her mouth, a station-wide announcement crackled to life. Zixara's usually calm voice was tinged with panic. "Attention all residents and personnel. Nexus Station is under attack by an unknown force. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Sarah and Dr. Zalthrak exchanged a look of dismay. "It's already started," the Quarian said, his voice quavering. "Whatever came through those micro-wormholes is here," Sarah finished grimly. "And Zaxlor is working with them." They raced towards the station's command center, fighting against the tide of panicked evacuees. The scene that greeted them was one of barely controlled chaos. Zixara stood at the center, issuing rapid-fire orders as holographic displays showed multiple breaches across the station. Ranger Connor, the Thraxian's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "We're facing an incursion unlike anything we've ever seen. These entities, they're not just invading, they're altering the very fabric of our reality." Sarah quickly briefed Zixara on their findings and the situation with Zaxlor. The Thraxian's compound eyes seemed to darken with each word. "This is worse than we feared," Zixara said. "Our weapons are ineffective against these reality warpers. We've lost contact with entire sections of the station." Sarah's mind raced, considering and discarding options rapidly. This was the kind of impossible situation that humanity had faced time and again in its history. Outnumbered, outgunned, facing an enemy that seemed unbeatable. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding a way to beat the odds. "Doctor," Sarah turned to Zalthrak. "You said the micro-wormholes were theoretically impossible with our current technology, right?" The Quarian's antennae twitched in confusion. "Yes, but I fail to see how that's relevant now." "Bear with me," Sarah interrupted. "If these entities are manipulating our reality, they must be operating on principles that violate our understanding of physics. But every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There must be a way to use their own reality warping against them." Dr. Zalthrak's eyes widened as he grasped Sarah's line of thinking. "Of course. If we could generate a localized field that amplifies the natural resistance of our universe to these alterations, we could create a weapon that turns their own power against them," Sarah finished, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Zixara's mandibles clacked in what might have been approval. "An audacious plan, Ranger. But how do you propose to create such a device?" Sarah's lips curled into a determined smile. "The same way humanity has always faced impossible odds, with ingenuity, teamwork, and a healthy dose of barely controlled chaos. Doctor, I'll need access to your research on quantum field manipulation. Zixara will need every scrap of data you have on these incursions." As they set to work, the station shuddered under another assault. Through the command center's viewports, Sarah could see spatial distortions rippling across the station's exterior, reality itself seeming to warp and twist. For hours, they worked feverishly, combining Quarian theoretical models, Thraxian engineering, and human intuitive leaps to create something that had never existed before. The device they cobbled together was a mess of jury-rigged components and experimental technology, held together as much by hope as by science. "It's ready," Dr. Zalthrak announced, his bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "But Ranger Connor, we have no way to test this. The effects could be unpredictable." Sarah hefted the device, which hummed with barely contained energy. Sometimes, Doctor, you have to take a leap of faith. Besides, unpredictable is humanity's specialty. Just then, the command center's doors burst open. In strode a figure that only vaguely resembled the Zaxlor they had known. His form shifted and pulsed, reality bending around him like a heat haze. Ah, the human who thought she could cage me. Zaxlor's voice echoed oddly, as if coming from multiple dimensions at once. How quaint. You stand at the threshold of a new era, yet you cling to your outdated notions of order and justice. Sarah stood her ground, the experimental device held ready. Maybe so, Zaxlor, but there's one thing you and your new friends didn't count on. Zaxlor's ever-shifting form seemed to pause, curiosity overtaking his arrogance for a moment. And what might that be, human? With a fierce grin, Sarah activated the device. We're really good at changing the rules. A pulse of energy erupted from the device, spreading out in a wave that seemed to distort and then stabilize reality itself. Zaxlor's form convulsed, his cry of rage turning to one of pain and confusion as the wave passed through him. What have you done? He gasped, his form flickering between his original Centaurian appearance and the reality-warped version. Turned your own game against you, Sarah replied, advancing as Zaxlor stumbled back. Seems like transcendence isn't all it's cracked up to be when the universe decides to push back. As the waves spread throughout the station, reports began flooding in. The invading entities were retreating, their reality-warping powers neutralized by the field generated by Sarah's device. Zaxlor, caught between two states of being, collapsed to the ground. Sarah stood over him, her expression a mix of triumph and grim determination. It's over, Zaxlor. Your gift from beyond the void just got returned to sender. As station security moved in to secure Zaxlor, Sarah turned to her allies. Dr. Zalthrak's eyes were wide with wonder, while Zixara's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of a relieved sigh. I must admit, Ranger Connor, Zixara said, when you first arrived on this station, I had my doubts about the stories I'd heard of human ingenuity. Consider those doubts thoroughly dispelled. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Just doing our job, Zixara. Humanity's got a knack for turning impossible situations on their head. Though I have to say, this one was a close call even by our standards. As they began the process of securing the station and assessing the damage, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Once again, humanity had faced an overwhelming threat and come out on top, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through quick thinking, adaptability, and the willingness to take risks. The danger wasn't over. Far from it. Whatever lay beyond those micro-wormholes was still out there, and Zaxlor's transcendence hinted at threats beyond their current understanding. But Sarah was confident that with allies like Dr. Zalthrak and Zixara, and with humanity's unbreakable spirit, they stood a fighting chance. As the first rays of the station's artificial dawn began to brighten, Sarah looked out at the stars beyond. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination. But humanity was ready to face whatever came next, one impossible challenge at a time. The final showdown. The aftermath of the reality-warping invasion left Nexus Station in a state of controlled chaos. Emergency repairs were underway, and the station hummed with the nervous energy of beings who had stared into the abyss and somehow lived to tell the tale. At the center of it all stood Sarah Connor, her uniform scuffed and singed, but her resolve unshaken. Status report, she barked, striding into the makeshift command center that had been set up in one of the station's intact sections. Dr. Zalthrak's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with a mix of excitement and exhaustion as he turned to face her. The good news, Ranger Connor, is that your device worked beyond our wildest expectations. The reality warping field has been completely neutralized throughout the station. And the bad news? Sarah asked, bracing herself. Zixara stepped forward, mandibles clicking solemnly. We've detected residual energy signatures consistent with micro-wormhole activity in the lower levels of the station. It appears that not all of the invading forces were driven back. Sarah's jaw tightened. Zaxlor. Still in custody, but... Dr. Zalthrak hesitated, his antennae twitching nervously. His physiology is unstable. The effects of his transcendence are in conflict with our reality-stabilizing field. We're not sure how long we can contain him. Sarah nodded grimly. Then we need to end this now. Where are those energy signatures strongest? A holographic map of the station flickered to life, highlighting a pulsing red area deep in the bowels of Nexus. Here, Zix's area indicated, an old maintenance sector. Curiously, it's an area that was scheduled for renovation just before Zaxlor's arrival on the station. Not a coincidence, I'd wager, Sarah mused. All right, here's the plan. Doctor, I need you to work on refining that reality-stabilizing device. See if you can make it more portable, more focused. Zix, Sarah, I want a security team ready to move on my command, equipped with whatever you've got that can disrupt these entities. And you, Ranger Connor? Dr. Zalthrak asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah's lips curled into a determined smile. I'm going to have a chat with our friend Zaxlor. Something tells me he knows more about what's waiting for us down there than he's letting on. The detention area where Zaxlor was being held was a marvel of alien technology, layers of force fields and reality anchors keeping the unstable Centaurian contained. As Sarah approached, she could see Zaxlor's form shifting and pulsing, as if fighting against the very fabric of space-time. Come to gloat, human. Zaxlor's voice echoed oddly, fluctuating between dimensions. I came for answers, Sarah replied evenly. What's really down there in the maintenance sector, Zaxlor? What are you and your new friends trying to accomplish? Zaxlor's form solidified for a moment, his multiple eyes focusing on Sarah with an intensity that was almost palpable. Accomplish? You small-minded fool. We stand on the brink of evolution itself. The beings you so crudely call invaders are the harbingers of a new age. They offered me a glimpse of what we could become, unfettered by the limitations of this paltry three-dimensional existence. Sarah leaned in close, her voice low and dangerous. And in return, you offered them a foothold in our galaxy, a way to bypass the natural barriers between dimensions. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through Zaxlor's ever-shifting form. Perceptive for a primitive species. Yes, the micro-wormholes were just the beginning. In the maintenance sector, a gateway is forming. When it opens fully, this station, this entire sector of space, will be remade in their image. Not if I have anything to say about it, Sarah growled. Zaxlor's laughter was a discordant chorus of multidimensional sound. You? A single human against the architects of reality itself. Your species' arrogance truly knows no bounds. Sarah straightened, her green eyes flashing with determination. Maybe. But then again, it's that same arrogance that saved this station once already. Don't count us out just yet. As she turned to leave, Zaxlor called out, his voice suddenly urgent. Wait, you can't possibly hope to stop them. But perhaps we could come to an arrangement. I could show you how to harness their power, to evolve beyond. Save it, Sarah cut him off. Some prices are too high, no matter the reward. Humanity's gotten this far by standing together, not by selling out to the highest bidder. With that, she strode out, leaving the frustrated curses of the trapped Centaurian behind her. Back in the command center, Sarah briefed her team on what she had learned. Dr. Zalthrak's modified reality-stabilizing devices were distributed to the security team, along with weapons that the Quarian scientist assured them had been calibrated to affect trans-dimensional entities. Remember, Sarah addressed the assembled group, a mix of station security and volunteers from various species. We're not just fighting for Nexus Station. If that gateway opens fully, there's no telling how far these reality warpers might spread. The fate of the entire galaxy could rest on what we do here today. As they made their way down to the maintenance sector, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the unlikely alliance they had formed. Humans, working alongside Thraxians, Quarians, and a dozen other species, all united against a common threat. It was a testament to the unifying power of adversity, and to humanity's knack for bringing disparate groups together in times of crisis. The maintenance sector was a nightmare of twisted metal and pulsing, otherworldly energies. Reality itself seemed to warp and bend around them as they advanced, kept at bay only by the steady hum of their reality-stabilizing devices. By the cosmic egg, Dr. Zelthrak breathed, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. The very laws of physics are breaking down here. It's fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. "Stay focused, Doctor," Sarah warned, her weapon at the ready. "We need to find that gateway and shut it down." They didn't have to search for long. At the heart of the maintenance sector, a swirling vortex of impossible colors and non-Euclidean geometries pulsed and grew. Around it, shapes that defied description moved and shifted, their very presence an affront to sanity. "That's it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the eldritch horror before them. "Zixera, have your team set up a perimeter. Doctor, what do we need to do to close that thing?" Dr. Zelthrak's antennae quivered as he analyzed the readings from his instruments. "The gateway is being powered by the station's own energy grid. If we can overload it, create a feedback loop, we might be able to collapse it on itself." Sarah finished. "All right, let's." Her words were cut off as one of the reality-warping entities suddenly materialized before them. It was a mass of writhing tentacles and eyes, its form constantly shifting and redefining itself. Into the ears, it pulsed, its thoughts invading their minds like shards of broken glass. "Your resistance is futile. Embrace transc and DNC or be unanade." Sarah gritted her teeth against the psychic assault. "Sorry, pal. Humanity's not big on ultimatums. We prefer to make our own choices." With that, she opened fire, her weapon spewing forth bolts of energy that seemed to distort and twist the very air around the entity. The creature recoiled, its form rippling in what might have been pain. All around them, chaos erupted as more entities poured through the growing gateway. The security team engaged them, their modified weapons proving surprisingly effective against the trans-dimensional invaders. Sarah fought her way towards the station's power coupling, Dr. Zelthrak close behind her. "Cover me," she shouted to Zixera, who was holding his own against a particularly large entity with surprising skill for a bureaucrat. As Sarah reached the power coupling, she realized the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Overloading the station's power grid could very well destroy Nexus along with the gateway. But the alternative, allowing these reality warpers to gain a foothold in their dimension, was unthinkable. "Doctor, on my mark, initiate the overload sequence," Sarah called out, her hands flying over the controls. Dr. Zelthrak's voice was steady as he replied, "Ready, Ranger Connor. It has been an honor working with you." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "Likewise, Doctor." "All right, in 3, 2, 1, mark." They activated the sequence simultaneously. The station's lights flickered and died as every ounce of power was diverted into the overload. The gateway pulsed and writhed, growing larger for a moment before beginning to collapse in on itself. "It's working," Dr. Zelthrak exclaimed. "The gateway is destabilizing." But their victory was short-lived. As the gateway began to implode, it created a vortex, pulling everything towards it with irresistible force. Sarah felt herself being dragged towards the swirling maelstrom of collapsing reality. Just as she thought all was lost, a hand grasped her arm. She looked up to see Zixera, his multiple limbs anchored to a sturdy piece of equipment, forming a living chain with other members of the security team. "Hold on, Ranger Connor," the Thraxian shouted over the roar of the collapsing gateway. "We're not letting you go that easily." With a Herculean effort, they pulled Sarah and Dr. Zalthrak to safety just as the gateway collapsed in on itself with a reality-shaking implosion. A shockwave of stabilizing energy washed over them. And suddenly, blessedly, everything was still. In the aftermath, as emergency power slowly flickered back to life, Sarah looked around at her unlikely team of allies. They were battered, exhausted, but alive, and victorious. "We did it," Dr. Zalthrak said, his voice filled with awe. "We actually did it." Sarah nodded, a weary but satisfied smile on her face. "That we did, Doctor. All of us together." As they made their way back to the upper levels of the station, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just in herself, but in the power of cooperation and determination that had seen them through this crisis. In the days that followed, as Nexus Station began the long process of rebuilding, Sarah found herself in high demand. Species from across the galaxy had heard of the human ranger who had helped save not just the station, but potentially the entire dimension from an otherworldly threat. "So, Ranger Connor," Zix-Era asked as they stood in the newly repaired command center, overlooking the bustling activity of the station, "what will you do now?" Sarah's gaze turned to the stars visible through the view screen. "There's still a lot of unanswered questions out there. Where did these entities come from? Are there more gateways? And let's not forget, there's still plenty of garden-variety criminals and smugglers to keep me busy." Dr. Zalthrak, who had been engrossed in studying the data from their encounter, looked up. "You know, Ranger, I believe my research into trans-dimensional physics could greatly benefit from some field work. Perhaps we could collaborate on future investigations." Sarah grinned. "I'd like that, Doctor. And something tells me we haven't seen the last of Zix-Era's talent for crisis management either." The Thraxian's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had come to recognize as embarrassed pleasure. "I must admit, this experience has awakened a certain taste for adventure. Nexus Station could benefit from a more proactive approach to security." As they discussed plans for future cooperation, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity had once again proven its worth on the galactic stage, not through overwhelming force or advanced technology, but through quick thinking, adaptability, and the ability to bring out the best in their allies. Whatever challenges lay ahead, be they interdimensional invaders, cunning criminals, or the vast unknown of space itself, Sarah was confident that humanity, and the bonds of friendship and cooperation they had forged, would be ready to face them head-on. The stars beckoned, full of mystery and danger, and Sarah Connor, Galactic Ranger, was eager to answer their call.